know, it's estimated about 26 of Americans ages 18 and older suffer from diagnosable mental illness. Now, there's a lot of people going undiagnosed due to the stigma behind having a mental illness. I personally have grown up with people constantly stigmatizing the illnesses, and it really impacted how I felt about me possibly having a mental illness. And there's so much stigma revolving around mental illness, and many people underestimate how it actually affects people and their lives. So with that being said, first I will be telling you how stigma affects people with mental health issues and how bad it can be and how it was treated differently back then. Then I will be telling you what causes stigma typically, and lastly, how people with mental illnesses can overcome stigma, or how you as a bystander can possibly support and help. Now, mental health viewed years ago isn't viewed the same as today. We have definitely made a lot of progress, but nowhere as near as much as we need. When placed in mentally ill in the facilities in the 80s, it allowed the general public to ignore the problem. They didn't really want to see anyone who had a mental illness roaming the streets because they thought of them as violent and unstable. Even worse was the treatments that they had in the facilities. Multiple times, they consisted of solitary confinement, hair pulling, and far, far worse. Many times, stigma can discriminate people with mental illnesses, such as taking away opportunities, such as housing, jobs. It's often mentioned how many people view mental illnesses. They say that people with mental illnesses are bad employees or bad to associate with, and that's not the case. People with illnesses get discriminated over something they can't control. And in 2019, a poll from the American Psychiatric Association says about half of the workers were concerned about discussing mental health issues at their job, and more than 1 in 3 were concerned about being fired if they sought mental health care. And now that we covered that aspect of it and how it affects people, let's move on. I'd like to talk about what causes typically the stigma behind mental health, or why people have that mindset. The problem with stigma is many people believe that it doesn't happen to children or teens, or just doesn't happen often in general. Lots of people find out that children or teens could possibly have a mental illness. They assume they just can snap out of it, and it's that easy. They don't take it as serious. Many times, stigma may come from misguided views that people with mental health problems may be more violent or unstable. And while some people have illnesses that are that bad, it is not as common, and it's not like that. You're not going to just see someone having a rampage in the middle of nowhere. A lot of illnesses are portrayed to have a misleading impact and leave such a tarnish on how people actually view them. So unless you have majored psychology or have some kind of medical stool, chances are most of your knowledge about mental illnesses come from newspapers, TV shows, or even the movies you watch. And with that being said, a lot of times movies portray illnesses as violent and people who lash out constantly. And the lack of information in the movies when they portray the actual illness is part of the problem as why people stigmatize it, because they're given misleading information. Overall, there are many reasons why people stigmatize mental health. There are ways to limit or attempt to ignore it, which is what I'm going to go over now. With that being said, lastly, I want to go over how people can stop or even improve stigma revolving around mental health. In many cases, people who live with mental health have, or at least some point, been blamed in their life or made feel less of a person. But that doesn't mean there aren't ways to fight the stigma. One of the ways is being educated. Being educated is one of the best things you can do to help with mental health stigma. Being able to correct or help someone understand the mental illness gives them a better understanding and teaches them to not stigmatize as much, and gives them a good understanding. So by talking or educating someone on a more regular to daily basis, society will hopefully overturn the false beliefs of the stigma, and when the myths are shut down and others are informed, it should get us closer to removing the stigma surrounding mental health. One of the many reasons why we need to talk about mental health, because mental health is so pushed off, people are not getting the treatment they need. Now, this is probably one of the hardest ones to do specifically if you actually have a mental health to help, like your illness, is to seek treatment and be able to get the help you need. And that's always hard because people will say treatment don't work, and it's hard and costly, and it makes you more reluctant to get treatment. More than half the people who get treatment as soon as they can tend to be able to almost manage their illness or fully recover. People with illness worry that treatment or even therapy won't help, or the doctor isn't going to understand what they're saying. And yes, treatment can be hard depending on your illness, age, or even how your family reacts to it, because your family has a great impact on it. But there are doctors who specialize with different illnesses and want to help you get the help you need. So, now that I've gone over how stigma affects people, what causes stigma, and how you can help it or ignore it, you now know the importance of getting rid of stigma. So now not only myself, but you can also help stop the stigma towards mental health. Thank you.